As you prepare to sell your practice, have you factored in the HR side, the people, the policies, and on and on? Well, most don't, but you should. Well, how do you do that? My guest today is an experienced HR professional, and she's going to tell us how to get started on doing just that. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. It's usually what they want, but care is better when it's the providers of care who own the practice, because then any decision that's got to get made, business, clinical, you name it, whatever it is made by the same people who have to turn right around and take care of a patient. So we can feel quite confident that the needs of the patient will always stay top of mind. My guest today is Debbie Rabishaw. Debbie has more than 30 years of HR leadership experience, much of it in healthcare and healthcare-related practices. She partners with physicians and practice leaders to navigate HR compliance, people operations, and growth in a highly regulated environment. As the founder of Next Step Advisory, Debbie provides fractional HR support focused on practical, real-world solutions that strengthen teams and support sustainable practice growth. A returning guest, Debbie, thanks for coming back on.
Thanks for having me again.
Yes, looking forward to this one. This is, I think, a topic that, at least if you're a seller, you're wondering about. You're certainly wondering about your people. There's more to HR than people, but you're certainly wondering about it, probably feeling a range of emotions about it. So I'm hoping that this can ground some people who are in that situation. Before we get there, though, that was a brief bio. Regular listeners can probably repeat along with me. That was a brief bio, but that's what I asked for. Fill in some of the gaps. Help us get to know you a bit better.
Sure, happy to. You mentioned I've had a long career, but I started my own company about 2 years ago now,
Mhm.
helping small businesses with their messy people needs because employees and people are messy.
Can you ever say
So
clean
I
people? I mean, you just, it's always messy, right? I mean,
never clean. It's
yeah,
never clean.
yeah.
Messy, confusing, complicated, and usually the leaders and business owners, they don't get into the business to be in the people business.
Hmm.
Although people are the most critical part of their business, they want to do the business of the business, and that's great. But I help guide owners and leaders and managers around those needs that help accomplish their objectives.
Plenty of cliches. Boy, life would be easier, but for the people. Business would be easier, but for the, like, there's,
HR
you
would be
probably
easier
have
except for the people.
HR would be easier except for the people, right? You
That's
could, you
right.
could fill in a lot of those.
I'm the first to say it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. All right, so let's get into it. The HR side of selling your practice. In your experience, why do the HR factors just tend to often get deprioritized, not factor as some of the other parts?
Yeah, I don't think it starts with the work that you're doing around the due diligence. I think it starts beforehand. How did you
Okay.
prioritize it beforehand?
Mm,
If you don't have somebody who can help, at least get your foundation laid
mhm,
so that you have a clean and operative foundation, I think it's not going to matter much to you during the sale. But during valuation, a stable company matters when
mhm,
you're trying to maximize your value. And so I don't think you realize what you don't know until you get that checklist during a due diligence process that
mhm,
says, do you have this? Do you have that? And
mhm.
the answer is often, holy heck, did I need that? I didn't know I needed that. So I think that's, it starts much earlier than the
Yeah.
preparation for the sale.
And I didn't think about this before you said it, but so the potential acquirer off big checklist, give us the following information. What types of HR related check boxes in your experience, are on that, if any?
Oh, you mean in preparing for that?
Yeah, like so now you're in due diligence phase, and you as the
Hmm.
potential seller are being asked for, gobs and gobs of information about all sorts of things. What
Hmm.
about your practice? What HR related, gobs of information in your experience, is typically asked for by the,
Asked for.
yeah, by the acquirer.
Um, they want to know, have you had any EEOC complaints? So that's really the EEOC is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and that's
Mhm.
usually about I've been discriminated against, or there's something
Mm,
I want to get pre-approval to a lawsuit. So have you had any discrimination claims? Have you had any harassment lawsuits filed? What does that look like? How are you onboarding your employees? What do your offer letter templates look like?
Mm,
What is the agreement? Because when they inherit these employees, they have to go with the agreements that you've put in place. Do you have insurance in place, EPLI or directors and officers, depending upon how you're structured,
hmm
that has protected you from things like
hmm
what are we inheriting? Um, what does your I-9 situation look like? I mean, I-9 is like a basic employment doc that establishes the employee's right to work in the United States, and it has to be completed within 3 days. And actually, with our current administration, they've just upped the penalty if you don't adhere to that. So it is really such an easy thing to take care of, and so many people do it incorrectly and put
Okay.
themselves at jeopardy. So a potential buyer is going to look at that. So you want to make sure that you've made that as clean as you can.
hmm
Um, what else? Your documentation. How are you offboarding people? What have you done in terms of terminating employees? And do you have people on leave right now? What states do you fall in? And are you adhering to the law in those states? What does your handbook look like? They will always, the first thing they're going to ask you is for your handbook because they want to see what rules
hmm
and benefits, like leave benefits, you've established for your employees, and if you are operating compliantly within the state.
Got it. So it sounds like if there's a couple of themes, it's they want to know about compliance and legality. Are you doing things in a compliant and legal way?
Right. And fair and something that's not going to jeopardize the reputation? Or is there something in how you're treating your employees that would indicate that these are not employees I would want to bring on board
Got it. Okay. That was good. That was an
based on the
exercise.
culture you've established, either by intent or by default?
Sure. Sure. I was going to add, do they ask for who are your A players? Who are why? Who are your B? Do they ever get it just in your experience?
Not during due diligence.
Okay.
I think through informal conversations, they may ask those things. Who's your sales team?
hmm
Right? Do you have an HR department? Do you have somebody doing your HR?
hmm
Who's on your finance team?
Okay.
Um, and they'll ask those kinds of things. But who would you want to keep? Maybe
Okay.
they ask that, but it's not generally a part of a due diligence checklist.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder why. I don't know.
Um,
Maybe the answer doesn't
because they'll
matter. I
probably want to
mean,
make that assessment themselves.
yeah, I was just kidding. Yeah. They probably want to do that themselves. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
Okay. So now let's flip back to the now you're a potential seller. So
Mm-hmm.
what factors should be considered, must be considered when you are selling? I guess maybe we hit a bunch of those, but like there's more, like your priorities, you know, we were talking before we started recording, and takeaway I took is if you wait until due diligence starts to kind of get your ducks in a row, you've probably missed a lot of you should be, I mean, put aside the fact that you should be running a culturally
Mm-hmm.
positive, productive place. But go back a year, 2 years prior, you're kind of getting ready to sell, or you're in that
Mm-hmm.
mode. What things should be, ought you be to be considering?
Um, I think you should make sure that all your employees are classified properly. What does
Okay.
that mean? It means that either you've determined that they're exempt or non-exempt, they're hourly, or they are not eligible for overtime,
hmm
which usually we think of as salary.
Salary, yeah.
And it's not, I don't want to pay them overtime, so they are not overtime eligible. There are specific Department of Labor wage and hour requirements that
hmm
specify who can be labeled non-exempt or
hmm
hourly and overtime eligible, and those who are exempt from overtime, which
Okay.
is typically the professionals that we know.
Yeah.
And so if you misclassify them, that is a big no-no,
hmm
and that needs to be addressed. So take a look at your employees to see if they've been misclassified or not, and you probably need help with that. Again, I can't stress enough the I-9s. That's a big deal. Make sure that you are doing that properly. Even if you plan to sell in 12 to 24 months, get it done now. Go through an HR audit with an external professional to see
hmm
what you really need to focus on, so you're not spinning your wheels trying to figure it out yourself. Um, if your handbook doesn't match your actual practice, update your handbook.
Hmm.
and make sure it is compliant for the states in which your employees reside. Especially because of COVID, a lot of small businesses have expanded to find talent in other states,
Okay.
but they're
Yeah.
not always compliant with their employment rules in other states based on the number of employees they might have. And smaller companies are usually, or practices are usually shielded from some of the obligations that larger firms have.
Okay.
But some of the employment law requirements start at employee one.
Okay.
So it's super, or employee two, and it's super important that you make sure that your handbook, which is I consider it the rules of the road,
Hmm.
are up to date
Hmm.
um, and compliant. Um, let's see. Pay inequities, I would make sure that you are compensating your employees in a way that you can articulate why you've made the decisions you've made.
Hmm.
Um, multi-state compliance gaps, which we've talked a little bit about, but a lot of states now have paid sick leave. So are you complying with that? Did you even know? Or are you thinking, I trust my employees and I'm a generous employer, so therefore it will meet any standard and I'm giving them what I think is the right thing, which is great, but not a complete way to address what you're obligated to as an
Yeah.
employer.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it just it as you're saying all this, I'm thinking, you don't want during the due diligence process for the potential buyer to say, I don't know, man, we can't replicate your generosity. We really don't have any like it's awfully messy. It's just awfully
Mhm.
messy in there. And as you're saying
Unless
all
it's
these
part
things,
of your
it's
culture, right?
yeah.
And that's the appealing part. That's what generated your sales, and then they have to figure out a way to do it.
Right. And and
But you're
and
right.
and what about let's dig into that a bit. Like, because the culture, I mean, it's tough to assess depending on what it is. It's always tough to replicate. When the culture is sort of wrapped up in the employee in the owner, or it's just, you know, as we've said before, you have a culture. It's either one you've defined or it's sort of grown up organically. And which one would you rather
Right.
have?
By
So
intent or default.
by intent or default, that's the way you said it. So,
Yeah.
you know, how did these play? Like, I guess first you have to figure out which one it is, and then, you know, how does that play to a buyer? Like, how do you deal with that if there's
Well,
how
I
can you tell
think
if it's
that
an
they're,
impediment or if it's, I'm not sure I'm asking this, I'm sort of struggling with the question, but
yeah.
you know what I mean?
So the owner's involvement, can that be an impediment? Is that what you're?
Or if it's, well, if it's highly specialized to the owner, or it's just sort of, or if
Well,
it's,
one of those things that you had asked me about 12 to 24 months before you're even engaging in the sale, what do you do?
Mhm.
And one of those things I think is that you have to figure out how involved your CEO is and how can you unwind some of that and start making sure that they are not as um, uh, tied up in the day-to-day business,
Okay.
because that's going to be unappealing. If one person is your business, you can't buy a person. You have to
Hmm.
buy the business.
Hmm.
And so the answer is almost as difficult as the question,
I know.
trying to
Yeah.
articulate what is that question. But I think if your business is built solely on somebody's reputation, you have to figure a way um, to unwind that CEO in a meaningful way, 12 to 24 months, without losing, the quality of
Right.
the product, the service, whatever it might be.
Right. I was just talking to this a marketing person who focuses a lot on branding for startups. And one element of branding is what's the name? And she tells all of them, do not name this after you. Dr. Smith
That's why
Podiatry.
I didn't call mine Rabishaw Consulting. I
Correct.
didn't want to do that. I have aspirations to grow, scale, and maybe one day sell. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to sell my name.
You don't want to sell
I
your
want
name, but the other thing you're doing is that you're telling any potential buyer, man, that's sort of built around
That's me.
her,
Right.
or yeah,
Totally.
which means we'd be buying her, but we can't because she's the seller. It doesn't work. Yeah.
Right.
So it's
Right.
the,
And then they may have to go through a rebranding when you sell the company
mhm,
to make sure that it doesn't happen again. If, let's say, a private equity firm, a PE
mhm,
firm buys it, And
Hmm.
then they have to flip it again in 5 to 6 years. What are they buying then?
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. There's a lot of considerations. The other consideration is how do you talk to your employees about it? And
Yeah, I
when do
was
you
going to
talk
ask you
to your
about the
employees
and
about it?
if and there's such a raging debate. We had a podcast guest on a month or so ago. Her episode will
Hmm.
be coming out soon, and she sold, and now she works with practices that want to sell. And she says, I think you should tell them. You can involve them. They get to know what's
Hmm.
going on. They can help. And she's definitely swimming against the tide on this one because it's typically don't
Hmm.
tell them until the day of, because of the fear. They're going to leave. They're going to this. They're going to that. It's going to hurt. Um, but you're saying, what if you're trying to keep it a secret, but they find out anyway, right? That's
Well, whatever you do, you have to make sure your communication plan is deliberate.
yeah.
It's by design. So if your choice is to wait, then you have to have a plan B in case, as you just mentioned, it leaks,
Hmm.
right? You have to be willing to have a small group be in on what's going on, depending upon what size your company is, or your
Hmm.
practice, or your
Hmm.
firm, whatever it is.
Hmm.
You have to be willing to um, have a conversation at any point about it.
Hmm.
And I think it's always, maybe in much smaller companies, to bring your employees along so they can start thinking about it. But I think it's a culture call. What is your culture? And what do you think will happen based on how you've been running your business? And I would ask somebody on the outside who's had experience with this. What do you help advise me and help me plan for that, communication, um, for structuring those communications and releasing those communications. And do
Hmm.
we have clients who are going to then find out? And is that what we want? Yeah. So I think that's why I tend to be on the keep it small first, not
Hmm.
just talk about it until you really know what's happening, but prepare.
But contingencies. Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Up.
prepare, in your mind, you can say, this is what I want to do to get ready for that moment in time
Hmm.
when I'm selling my practice,
Hmm.
but you don't have to share why you're doing that.
Yeah. And then, right, in case it gets out or in case somebody finds out, we need, if it's an employee, if it's, I like the way, if it's patients or customers, what are we going to say? Just be ready with
Mm-hmm.
something,
Mm-hmm.
be ready with
Yeah,
something that makes sense, that's positive. I'm sure there's a whole
right.
study on how to do that.
Because as we know, I mean, and no matter what we do in our lives, we can plan, and then there's actually what happens,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could
So,
see the value of not telling, right? Because you don't want people to leave. Even if they're like good people, they're going to look around, they're going to take care of themselves, which is totally rational.
right,
And if they find a good job 2 months before you want to sell, well, then what are you gonna hire a replace? Like it's a big headache.
right,
Yeah.
right. I agree. People, it's kind of like when you terminate somebody and they don't hear anything, the blood rushes to their ears because they're like, okay, I got bills to pay. What am I going to do? I've been here forever. Am I going to get the same amount of PTO?
Hmm.
Do
Hmm.
I need to find a different organization? I liked the culture here. Or they start justifying why they didn't like the culture, and
Hmm.
they're definitely ready to jump.
Right. Right. So we've talked about sort of the legal stuff, the legal basket, the compliance basket, the communications basket. Any
Mhm.
other like major sort of HR categories you would say? And also don't wait for the due diligence day to get your ducks in a row. Like
Yeah,
couple, I would say
I
for
think that,
person, I'd say like a couple years on this kind of thing. I'd rather be finished early, before rather than
well,
scrambling at the end. So,
it's so funny. I went through this with a firm, and what I did, I was their full-time head of HR. And during the due diligence process, it was one of the smoothest parts of the process because when I started, I had done my HR audit to see where are we at, what needs to be done.
mhm,
And and it's so funny because the owner kept saying, I don't know why you're doing this, but I trust you. Right. I don't know why. And so when we were going through the due diligence, she said, oh my God, they asked all the questions. And we said, yes, we're doing that. Yes, we're doing that. Yes, we're doing that. And she said, now I know why you were making us do all these things.
mhm,
And so that's why I think that HR shouldn't be an afterthought
mhm,
in completing a due diligence checklist. It really should be something that you have prepared in advance, because it's part of taking care of your employees.
Well,
It's not
yeah,
just
like,
a compliance.
you know, shouldn't you want, forget about whether you're selling or not, or you're getting ready to sell. Shouldn't you want a good employee handbook that is very transparent on here are our policies. Here's how things work here. I mean, that
Mhm.
just seems like it's a good idea. It's kind
Mhm.
of ridiculous to have to say out loud, you should have proper I-9 documentation and all the other documentation um, to stay legal and
It
compliant.
could be,
Like, you
I
know,
think maybe potential buyers, if I were a potential buyer, I would think it is probably, if you don't have that stuff in place, it could be indicative of what the rest of the inside of the
I was just
business
going to
looks
say,
like.
like, what other messiness is going on in there? Like,
Right.
this isn't a choice. This is legal. This is, you are illegal right now. I guess is that's the greatest way to say it. But you know, these,
You're less than optimal.
you are
Yeah.
less than optimal, right? You are
Yeah.
way less than optimal. Like, how do you run this place? So,
Right.
because one of the previous episode with you, you said, one of the first things you do with a new client is let's check out your employee handbook. And if I remember correctly, it's like more often than not, there isn't one, which just means it's, if you want to know what's my culture, is it wrapped up in me or not, I think you have the beginnings of an answer, because everybody's coming to you for, can I take today off, or what, it's, you
Right.
need these things, just
Right. You
just to
don't want to
run
be the
well.
hub with everything. You want the business to survive without you.
Yeah.
And you have to start preparing for that inevitability.
Yeah. Which is the crux of what a buyer wants to buy, is because you're
Exactly. And
leaving. Yeah, you're
maybe that's how
leaving.
we should have articulated it
Well,
back
yeah,
in
yeah.
earlier
Like,
in our
you're leaving.
conversation.
And so they want to buy a thing that generates revenue, even with you not there. And
Hmm.
so part of it is, are we compliant, and do we have good practices when it comes to people and
Right.
policies? So yeah. Are there any other broad HR categories, that we didn't
Oh,
get to in the context of
I think
this?
those are the most salient takeaways.
Okay.
Are how do you plan for it? How do you make sure that um, the business can survive post owner?
Mhm.
How do you make sure that you're treating your employees well and that you've um, implemented all the tools that you really need to, not just should,
Mhm.
uh, long before you want to sell?
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes your I will allow for this. Sometimes your policies, well, we need to be generous, increase your liabilities on the books. And when you have to show your financials to somebody, that may raise a red flag. So case in point, maybe you have a PTO policy
Mhm.
where you have no cap on your PTO and you can roll over as much as you want. Well, in certain states, that is a earned benefit and a payable benefit upon termination.
Oh.
So if you don't have the right rules around your PTO plan, that could translate into a financial liability.
Mm.
So I think there's lots of interconnected activities
Yeah.
that you really don't think about. That could be a financial red flag, not just a
Right.
people red flag.
Got it. Got it. I guess the big question is, the context is, we've caught the listener's attention. They're like, whether they're thinking of selling, or we've just generally caught them, and they say, Debbie's right, but we need to get better at this, but they just don't know where to
Mhm,
start. Is there some
mhm.
simple thing you would recommend that they do to kind of, get off the starting line and get started down the path of, getting the
Get
HR
yourself
side
a
ready?
partner to
Yeah.
do it. This is not the competency. I wouldn't be in there meeting with patients and taking
Hmm.
their health histories.
Yeah.
Find somebody who can help, who can do it for you, who can pass it along if you need that, and that you can retain as a thought partner if you have problems down the line.
Yeah.
But I think just like anything that is not your primary competency, you find people who can help you.
Especially, and I agree, and because sometimes with some episodes they're like, yeah, do X, do it yourself, go look something up, or it depends on what the topic is. But we're talking about laws, compliance, looking around the corner on, the PTO
Yeah.
policy that leads to this financial trigger, different states. I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't wing this one
Well,
on my own or try to play HR on TV or whatever. I would, yeah.
yeah. And probably the thing that I would also offer Carl around that is you're gonna want to pull up ChatGPT and pop in, what should I do? But first of all, you may not have the experience of what that looks like, boots on the ground. You may not ask it the right prompt.
And you
You
don't even
may
know if
omit
the answer is
something.
accurate.
You don't know if the answer is accurate. So you can ask ChatGPT till you're blue in the face,
Yeah.
but all it is giving you a response back to whatever input you put in,
Hmm.
and yours may not be informed input. And so then you have to know how to actually operationalize whatever, you
Yeah.
know, what's on the screen.
Yeah. 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 I mean, Dr. X listener, if the last time a patient said to you, well, ChatGPT said I should do blah about this
Right. How did
medical
you feel?
condition that I'm talking to you about, and you just silently, your blood
Right.
boils.
It's
Good
the
luck on
same
this. It's the
It's the same
same.
thing,
Good
right?
luck
You
on
don't
this
love it
one.
when people start Googling their conditions.
Yes.
So,
So, sometimes you can wing it, but get started on your own. I would say if you can't find
right.
an employee handbook or the date on it, it's like a few, like just call it what it is, man. And just
Yeah.
get,
Just
and
bite the
even if you're
bullet.
not selling, like you're not thinking of it, why would,
Right. It helps you. I
these
mean,
are
there
good
are there are
things.
significant financial penalties if
Yeah.
you are if you are found to be in breach is harsh, but in breach of the law. And I think that you don't want to suffer those. And it only takes one
Right.
employee with
Or an
ill
employee
intent to
saying,
go to an agency or to turn you into the Department of Labor or whatever it is.
right. Or an employee saying, well, look, I have 2 months of banked PTO over the years. You got to pay that to
Right.
me. And this is what it says in the agreement. And I read it and you look
That's
like
right.
you
And it's the
didn't.
law
And
let's
it's the
say in
law in our
Illinois.
state.
It's
Yeah.
the law in California.
Yeah.
It's the law somewhere.
So I'll be looking for that check. Yeah. And you're like, what? And so, yeah. Yeah. And then you have to drop everything and deal with it. Is that what you want? So, yeah.
Right.
Agreed. Agreed.
Right.
Debbie, thank you for coming back on Practice
Oh, thank
Care.
you so much.
We've got you a couple more times this year. Always good topics, practical stuff that just, you know, I got an MBA. Did I have an HR class? Sure, we didn't. You become, yeah, HR is important, but it's the devil's in the details, especially when it comes to laws and
Yeah.
compliance. So, and just
Yeah.
good
Well, it's
behavior.
always fun
Yeah.
chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you. So we've got your contact information, which are in the show notes for your episode. So anyone who wants to get a hold of Debbie, now you've got another way to do it. And a couple things before we wrap up. First, if you're like Debbie and I and you serve private practices or you're a private practice owner yourself, either way, you've got some experience on the business side of private practice, and that could be anything. Don't overthink it. Something that you think is boring and who would care, I promise you. It's important to others and they're struggling with it. So in the show notes to every episode, there's a link, a couple of clicks. Tell us what's on your mind and we'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, Practice Care is one word. It's so easy to spell. It's just like it sounds. Search for it, subscribe to Practice Care. We drop a new episode every week, and that's just the easiest way to stay up to date. So please do that today. Thanks very much, and until next time.